Welcome on the show, the Great British Bake Off 2021 winner, Giuseppe.
The King of Bake Off 2021, Giuseppe.
Winner of Great British Bake Off 2021, Giuseppe Dell'Anno.
6 days after filming the final, I was on a plane to Milan to start a new job there. I was living in almost this split reality where I was being my normal self in Italy, Milan. And then as soon as I landed in the UK, I felt like there were paparazzi at the front door.
So when you did hear your name being announced as the winner, take me through what was it going through your head in like the lead up to it, and then when you heard your name?
I don't know, Ethan. First few seconds were really, well, they are blurred in my memory. I never went on that show with the intention of winning it. Once I stepped foot into the tent for the first time, from that point onwards, I've just enjoyed it. So when I got Bologna with the handshake, although I was, a 45-year-old engineer, very grounded in reality, I almost welled up.
What was it like thinking that like over 9 million people see you bake every single week?
I was terrified, Ethan. I was terrified. I haven't run a single baking class of mine without somebody from North America coming over.
So what was the process like of filming the show?
It was very different from what it had been in the past because of lockdown. I never left for 7.5 weeks. So it was a very surreal experience. So we were filming for 2 days, one episode, then practicing for 2 days the following episode, filming. There was no stop. It was draining. It was physically draining, it was emotionally draining.
Welcome on, Giuseppe Dell'Anno. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Ethan? All good?
I'm doing well, thank you. So, if people don't know who you are, explain to them what you do.
That's a very good question. How long have you got? I can tell you what I used to do. I am an engineer, a chemical engineer that rose to minor fame in 2021 after winning the Great British Bake Off.
Yeah. So before we talk about all of that, let's go right back to the start. So what were you like as a young child, and what was your childhood like growing up?
I was. I had a very happy childhood. I've been spoiled by a really close, tightly knitted family, and I had one of those opportunities that have become rarer and rarer over time by having both my parents from the same village where I grew up in, essentially. So I had a very large extended family always around the corner. So yeah, it's been a very happy childhood. I think, well, like every kid, I had my ups and downs. I've always been not the most sociable kid in town. I like to spend a lot of time by myself, and I still do, actually. I'm still rather socially awkward, but yeah, overall, I was very spoiled. Also, I have a sibling. I have a little sister that is, however, a lot younger than me. She was born 6 years after me. So I grew up in the very early stages of my childhood almost as an only child. And that, that means being spoiled by I was the first grandchild for my grandparents, which attracted a lot of attention and a lot of care from the extended family. So yeah, overall, I can't possibly complain. I had a very happy childhood.
Yeah, and you talked about it quite a lot before about how your father was an Italian chef. So how did your father's influence shape your relationship with food?
I don't think it was just my father, actually, but my dad, yeah, he was a professional chef, and actually he was a professional baker and a passionate chef. So he was a baker by profession, but he used to cook as a passion, just because he liked it. But my extended family have got plenty of uncles, aunties, cousins in the business. and pretty much every single person in my family. There are very few exceptions of people that cannot cook. That is a very common trait in Italian families, but in my family in particular, it was not just that everybody was really good in the kitchen, but food has always been like the common family language. I've always tell people that we never discussed sport or religion or politics or money at the Christmas table. It was always everything was about food. It was about who made what, how did they cook it, where is the recipe from. So everything that all the important aspects of food for me come really from my extended family, not just from my dad.
Yeah. So what was your dream job as a kid when you were growing up?
That's a very good question. I've, as every other kid, I had as my dream job were pretty much those jobs of all the people that I really admired growing up. So I remember when I was in primary school, I wanted to be a teacher because I admired my primary school teacher. But I've always been a relatively creative person. So when I had to start identifying my future specialism in high school, I've always, first of all, I've always wanted to go technical. I've always been very good with maths and with technical subjects. And being very creative, I would have loved to be more in the space of architectural design. And I still have a bit of a thing for very nice, good-looking, well-designed buildings. I've got a thing for design in general, not just buildings, but even when it comes to items and tools and pieces of equipment, everything that is beautifully designed always grabs my attention. And back in the days, I just wanted to do something that was related somehow with with the field of creative design.
Yeah. So was like being like a baker, doing stuff like that ever on your radar? Because obviously your dad was professional radar. So did you ever think of doing that instead of going down the engineering route?
Yes and no, in the sense that I come from a generation where my parents only considered a technical career as an acceptable career. So I've always been this mantra that you can either be a medical doctor, an engineer, an architect, a professor. You have got to have a big profession if you want to be successful. So the possibility of replicating my dad's craftsmanship was never considered as an option in my family. So I didn't really consider it as an option. But I have to say that I've always been naturally drawn to the space of catering, the food industry, the entertainment industry as well. In fact, my very first job that I had when I was 15 years old was in the restaurant of a four-star hotel that is in my hometown. And I have to say that working as a waiter and within the catering business, got me through university because I could work at the weekends and sustain myself through the university while I was studying engineering. So whilst it never occurred to me that I would have made a professional in the long term in the food industry, I actually ended up working in the food industry just to support myself, because that was probably the easiest thing that came to me. You see, I could have never worked in I don't know, in a repair shop, because I'm not particularly good when it comes to engines and mechanics, although I'm an engineer. So I could have never, I can barely change the oil of my car. That's the most I can do. But yeah, I was always naturally drawn towards the space of food and hospitality. And I have to say that I've always considered that not just a job, because I've always taken a lot of pleasure into cooking something that people would appreciate and sharing food with guests, and lay up food beautifully on the buffet table. I've always felt very proud when that worked out quite nicely. So it's always been my passion. It's always been an hobby. Strangely enough, never considered it as a proper profession. I would have never guessed in a million years, up to 5 years ago, that I would have ended up being a professional baker at some point in life. I suppose life is much more creative than we can possibly be.
Yeah. So you went to uni in Italy and then decided to go studying in the UK. So what was the thinking behind that decision?
That's a good question. So I never actually actively decided that I was gonna be an expat, as you call them in the UK, or an immigrant, effectively in a different country. My desire to come to the UK initially, it was only for a 6 months project, and it was mostly dictated by the very practical need to become better at speaking and understanding English, mostly because in the engineering world, English is the official language. I studied on English textbooks at uni, and whichever field I would have ended up working in the engineering space, I realized very soon that it was going to be very likely that I had to speak with colleagues, with foreigners, and with colleagues in other countries, and necessarily I would have done that in English. So my first, the only need that pushed me to move to the UK was necessarily just to become better at speaking English as a second language. That's all. I would have never imagined back in the days that those 6 months would have turned into 25 years. But initially, the plan was just to be in the UK for 6 months. In fact, after 6 months, I did move back to Italy, but then I got offers for a PhD first and a job later, all offers that were too good to say no to, that I kept accepting. And the whole thing almost organically grew into, a life abroad, really.
Yeah, so through your career in engineering, how did you keep that passion for baking alive?
Need. It was more out of necessity, really. Mostly because growing up in a family where everybody can, whip up a cake in like 15 minutes. I never felt the need of learning anything myself. I only absorbed this passion for food, uh, which is almost like a religion admiration, a religious admiration that me, as many other Italians, have got for food. But I never felt the need of learning anything, because wherever I went, whatever family I was having meals in, whichever household I was visiting, there was always somebody there to offer me croissants, biscuits, pizzas, you name it, whatever bake you can think of, it was always available. It was only when I moved out of my hometown and I started university in a different place in Tuscany that I started to crave the Sunday cakes that I didn't have anymore, obviously, because my dad was nowhere near to provide me with cakes on Sunday. So I realized that I had to start learning making them myself. But then it was really when I became a dad that the need of baking more at home sort of skyrocketed, because I be growing up with this attention to food quality and everything that you um, put on the table. When I had to start feeding my kids, it became of utmost importance that that the quality of what I was feeding them was the best I could possibly provide. So there was no chance on earth that I would have given them any confectionery bought in a supermarket. So I started making more cakes for them, making biscuits for their breakfast. Today is Friday. Friday in my household is pizza night, and it has been for as long as I remember. And my kids expect a homemade pizza from scratch every Friday night. So I've got some pizza dough proving downstairs in the kitchen. So when I started to feed, young kids. Is when I started to bake regularly for them, and it's also the fact that in the UK it's very difficult to find really well, not anymore actually, but up to probably 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, unless you were in London, it was very difficult to find very good quality bread. So I had to start making my own. I started making sourdough way before sourdough became fashionable, before the COVID lockdown. Mostly because I just missed proper loaves of crusty, rustic bread, which are quite common and a commonplace on Italian tables. So I had to start making my own just because I didn't have any place where I could buy them. The situation is very different nowadays, thankfully, because there are many bakeries that provide them around here. But it wasn't like this 10 years ago.
Yeah, so when you started like baking for your kids, as you mentioned, was all of the things that you were doing like authentic recipes of family recipes, or did you also start developing them and innovating them?
No, I think I've always been a big traditionalist when it comes to bakes. Well, first of all, I have this big, actually, give me a second, I'll show it to you because it's really nice to see. I have, this big family reservoir of notes.
Wow.
These are all my dad's and big recipes that I've been collecting over the years, all from my extended family. So I've always been, going back to these to uh, to find inspiration for things that I wanted to bake. But more than being creative, I've always been a bit of a perfectionist in everything I do. So even when it came to remaking traditional recipes and family recipes, I've never been happy with what I actually found in the notes from the start. I've always been tweaking the recipes, whether they were because they were too sweet or not sweet enough, or the level of flavor wasn't exactly what I was expecting, or the texture wasn't just what I was expecting. So I started to play a little with them, and it's really fulfilling. I have to say, this is, you get in your all the bakers that are listening to this will relate to this. You get through a learning curve, and you start off by just sourcing the best recipes you can source and replicating them at home. And after you've done that for long enough, you start understanding what happens when in your cake sponge you increase or reduce the amount of flour, increase or reduce the amount of eggs, for example, and you start to understand what to do in order to change the texture or the flavor of your bake in a specific way. When you get to that point, everything it's like an entire world opens to you, because you're starting to understand really what it is that you're creating in the oven, and you feel like empowered to do so. And especially after the first tests, when actually things work out, you start to understand that you've got power over those recipes, and you don't have necessarily to rely anymore on the good recipes that you find on the internet or from friends or family, but you can create your own. And that's what led me to produce the recipes that ended up in my books. So I always say that the recipes that I propose to others are 100% authentic, because they come from, that's where they come from. But in a way, I like to think that I have sort of built on them and given them my own twist, my own personal interpretation, and perhaps hopefully improve them in a way. I don't tend to be particularly outlandish when it comes to putting recipes together. So, especially after being on Bake Off and having become a part of that beautiful community that is the Bake Off bakers, there are some bakers that I've met over the years that are proper nutters. They can put together the most, bizarre flavors, and they work out beautifully, beautifully. I still remember one of the many cakes that I've tasted in the tent were from one of them in particular was from Lizzie, and she made a sage based sponge, And to me, sage screams roasts and roast potatoes, roasted dinner. It certainly doesn't doesn't scream a sponge, but that sponge that she made was delicious. And the same goes for some other cakes that I tasted from Jürgen, for example, that added some. I remember black pepper in some of his cakes, or some things that I would have never considered as a traditional ingredient for a cake. So I certainly don't belong to that category of people that uses I don't know, miso paste in chocolate ganache. I don't do any of those crazy things. mostly because perhaps there is a bit of a lack of confidence there in doing something so innovative. But I'm a strong believer that if it ain't broken, you don't need to fix it. I mean, the recipes that I tend to refer to are delicious as it is. I don't feel any urge to come up with bizarre or crazy new flavor combinations. That's just not me.
Yeah. So do you think a lockdown improved your baking? Because I'm assuming you were baking more. And do you think did that push you to apply for the Bake Off?
Undoubtedly, 100%, Ethan. That's exactly what happened. I don't think that the lockdown gave me. I mean, I didn't improve my baking particularly during the time. I was certainly baking more bread specifically, because that's one of the things that is very difficult to bake if you've got an office job. Because you have got to stick to specific timings, and if you're out of the house from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening, it's very difficult to do it. But obviously, working from home, that becomes much easier all of a sudden. It certainly gave me the time to even consider applying to Bake Off, because if it wasn't for the lockdown, I would have never had the time to watch the show on a repeat as I was doing in those days, or put together the questionnaire that you have to put together when you apply for the show, or shoot the video, the small clip, the 60-second clip that they ask you to attach to your application. I mean, the time more than that I had available back then, more than helping me with the baking, it helped me with the application process, definitely, and the and the selection process that followed as well.
Yes, really, why did you apply? Like, what was behind that decision?
Yeah, I've been asking that question to myself as well. Why did I put myself through this? Well, I applied because I. This is a funny one. So I am not a major football fan. Yeah. So, but obviously, growing up in Italy, I was surrounded by people of all ages and of all genders, screaming at TV when their team was playing well or was not playing well enough, and everybody in Italy becomes a coach when the national team is playing. Very much like in England, I have to say, it's not very different. But I've always sort of taken the mickey out of the people that felt so passionately about football, because I just could never relate to that. But then I found myself screaming at the TV just when watching Bake Off, and doing exactly the same things that sport fans would do when watching a football match. What I was doing while watching somebody putting together the showstopper, I was screaming at them, "That's not the way you do a Genoas. This is the way you do a Genoas." So I've always been a fan of the show, and I've always felt particularly. I found it always particularly relatable. Because I mean, it was easy for me to see myself in the shoes of those bakers. But then, realistically, I never thought of applying. Really, it was mostly because I had my kids commenting on my bakes, and them being fun on the show. They sort of jokingly suggested that I would apply, which I did, and I ended up being selected. So it was. I don't know. It came out of just sheer admiration for the show, I suppose.
Yeah, so talk me through that process from like first applying to actually getting on that show. How long was it? What type of things did you have to do?
Well, it's well known now that's how the process works, because many bakers have discussed this already in the past. It's a long process, because there are many applicants, and I think that during the lockdown years, the number of applications actually went up significantly, because obviously more people were in the same position as I was, where they had more time to put it together. So they had lots of applications. It's a long process. They test several aspects. I have to say that my selection process took place almost entirely during lockdown, therefore virtually and remotely through Zoom calls and Teams calls. Not necessarily in person, but I did have to go through an in-person audition, which was towards the final stages of the selection process. That it had to hand it was driven by a lot of swabbing and COVID testing, masks, and social distancing. It wasn't easy, obviously, and it must have been a nightmare for the production team to organize something like that with all the COVID restrictions. But it was good fun. The whole process lasted a few months. I applied at the end of November, towards the end of the final episodes of the show from the previous series. When at the end they publicize and they tell you to apply
Yeah.
to the particular. Yeah. So it was towards the end of November, and I went through several phone calls, interviews. I had to send lots of photos of all my bakes, which was really difficult for me, actually, because I'm no millennial by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm not an Instagram. I don't belong to the Instagram generation. So I've always baked for the sake of baking and for the sake of eating my bakes. I didn't bake for the sake of shooting it and putting it on Instagram. In fact, I didn't even have an Instagram account before Bake Off. So for me, it was difficult to prove to these people that what I told them I could do, I could actually do. So I spent lots of, in those months, I was baking a lot, mostly to take photos so that I could send them to the production team to, substantiate my claims in a way. And the whole thing went on until the end of March. So the whole thing lasted 4 or 5 months, roughly, in total. At the end of March, I was told that I was going to be part of the famous dozen. And then we started to, develop the recipes for the show that we filmed a few months later.
Yeah. So how was that feeling when you got told that you would be on Bake Off? You got chosen, and at that point, how far did you think that you would get?
So my reaction, I don't know if you have seen the show, but when my name was announced as a winner, I reacted with a stunned silence. I went as stiff as a board, and it took me just a few seconds for my brain to compute what was actually happening. When I was told that I was going to be one of the 12 bakers, I had exactly the same reaction, to the point that the lady that called me on the phone and gave me the news was like, "Giuseppe, are you there? Did you faint? What happened? Say something." Because I just remained silent for a few seconds, and she kept saying, "Well, a lot of people have reacted crying, a lot of people have reacted shouting and laughing. Very few people react as silently as you have." But that was my reaction. It was stunned silence. But then when I was told I was going to be on the show, I was hoping to be able to make it for a couple of weeks. I was convinced that I wouldn't make it anywhere after week 3, which is bread week. I was like, there is no chance that I can make a bread that Polo Hollywood will ever be happy with. So I never considered the possibility of that happening. So it was quite surprising for me to. It was a weekly surprise every time that my name didn't come up at the elimination, that I had made it to the following week, and all the way to the end, I have to say.
Yeah. So what was the process like of filming the show? How long was it, and what did your life look like during that time?
It was very different from what it had been in the past because of lockdown. So we had to be sort of reclused in a almost jailed in a gilded cage for the whole duration of the filming. Because of the regulations, we couldn't have any interaction with the external world. So we were swabbed, tested, and when the results were clear, we were admitted into the bubble, and we never left. I never left for 7.5 weeks, together with the other finalists. So it was a very surreal experience, in a way. So on one hand, it was draining. It was physically draining. It was emotionally draining, because we were filming for 2 days one episode, then practicing for 2 days the following episode, and filming. There was no stop in the whole process. So it was like that for 7.5 weeks. So it was really, really full on and intense. And I did start to lose the will to live towards the end, but it was really just too much to cope to deal with. But it was also extremely pleasurable, because I was doing something that I really loved to do, day in and day out, the whole day, every day. And the fact that I was in this hotel with all the other bakers, and with all the production team, including the judges and the presenters, we were all living in the same hotel. We were having lunch and dinner and breakfast together every day. I think that, well, it made it look almost like a very long, awkward holiday, in a way, because I was catered for the time. I didn't have to worry about doing my own washing up, doing my cleaning, cleaning the room, or doing my cooking. Somebody was consistently attending to me, which was something I hadn't experienced in a long while. But also, we developed a very strong bond with the other bakers, which is always the case with every season of Bake Off. But in my case, particularly, because we were literally living together, and sharing also hints and suggestions while we were preparing for the following episode. I think that built a really strong community sense. The camaraderie was through the roof, and I suppose that also sharing that experience with the production team created a very good gelled very much the relationship with the producers. So whenever they were asking you questions, for example, in the Vox Pops, whatever you see the interviews, when you see the interviews of the bakers during the show, the relationship with the producer was really close, because we had been dancing in a disco night the night before together. We had been enjoying Paul's pizzas previously, all together at the same table. So it became, it was very easy to communicate with them. And I think that in that particular season and in the previous season, which were the only two that were filmed in a COVID bubble, I think that came through as you could feel that there was a big, strong connection between the bakers themselves and between the bakers and the production team.
Yeah, that family feeling must have felt amazing. So, during that time, did you just take that time off work? So, how did that all work?
Well, the thing is that I had lots of leftover holidays, because coming out of an entire year of lockdown, where we couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't travel, so I had lots of leftover holidays. I think that I ended up taking 4+ weeks out of my holidays, and I used up all of my holidays, my annual leave, and then I had to take about 3 weeks of unpaid leave from my job to be able to do that. Thankfully, my manager back then and the CEO of the company that I was working with, they were the only few people that knew where I was, because I obviously couldn't tell anybody, but I had to, first of all, inform them and get their approval, but also we filmed some of the backstories in the same workshop where I used to work daily. So we had to have the approval, obviously, of the CEO of the company to get the filming crew in the premises. So they knew where I was, and they were very supportive. So they gave me the chance to take some time off, unpaid time off work during those weeks. And the whole thing eventually worked out quite nicely. The funny thing is that I didn't tell them how it was going. They didn't know that I had won. They found out, like the rest of the country, only when the final was broadcast. And that, I suppose, was part of the fun back then, because keeping the secret wasn't particularly hard. I have to say, I thought it was going to be harder, but in reality, nobody actually asked, because nobody wants to know, really. Nobody wants to spoil the surprise. So it was easy to keep the secret, and it was really enjoyable to see the reactions of the people that knew me, especially in the working space, when they saw the final on TV and they realized that I had won. It was really humbling in a way, but pleasurable, I have to say. I got a lot. I was the recipient of a lot of love that came to me from all my friends and family. Not too much, because my family is entirely in Italy, and in Italy the show isn't even broadcast, so they had no idea what was going on. And they still to this day, they haven't got a really good grasp of how big a deal Bake Off used to be, at least in those years in the UK. I've tried to explain it to them, but I don't think I managed to pass on the message well enough. So this was coming more from my circle of friends, than the family surrounding me.
Yeah. So during the show, you got handshakes from Paul Hollywood and Star Baker. So how did those two things feel? And with the Star Baker, did that give you a lot of confidence going into the next week?
Confidence and I don't go very well hand in hand together. I'm the most self-flagellating person on earth, and I lack confidence pathologically. But when I got the first handshake from Paul Hollywood, I almost welled up, because that was over. Well, it was Bread Week, by the way, the famous week that I thought I would never pass. I ended up having my first handshake. It was for a focaccia that was drenched with all the flavors and the actual ingredients that sort of made my childhood as nice as I mentioned earlier on. So, growing up, one of my mid-morning snack, I remember spending my mornings before school with my grandparents. My mid-morning snack was some black olives with some fresh bread. Another one was some pane pomodoro, which is tomato over a specific type of bread, which you would call like a stale bread, a very crunchy type of Italian bread. So when I was concocting the design and the recipe for that focaccia, I brought all these flavors together. So that focaccia to me meant much more than it was not just a piece of bread. It was like a concoction of all the best memories and the best flavors I could think of from my childhood. So when I got Paul Hollywood handshake, although I was, a 45-year-old engineer, very grounded in reality, I almost welled up. I felt like I was going, I'm going to cry on camera. So, get a grip, Giuseppe, please. It was difficult to control myself, but it was very emotional. It's quite a very strong, overwhelming feeling, I have to say. Especially if you, like me, are a fan of the show and you know what that means. It's a powerful situation to be in, definitely.
Yeah. So what was your favorite bake that you made on Bake Off? And then what was your most challenging bake that you tackled during the competition?
Well, my favorite bake was actually my most challenging bake. The two things go hand in hand together. When I think it was dessert week, I think they called it, or patisserie week. It must have been dessert week. When I received the brief for the showstopper, the brief said, well, the judges would like you to produce a Joconde imprimé made out of 3 different baked elements, including bavarois, sponges. I just read the brief and I didn't know I didn't even know how to spell Gioconda en primé, let alone know how to bake one. I'd never done any of those things. So it was pretty difficult for me to come up with something that would work. And I created this strawberry and pistachio. It was not a cake in reality because it was made out of Bavarois. There were some cake inserts and a mirror glaze and a fresh fruit garland on top. It was super sophisticated and very posh looking. But that was, I didn't get a handshake for that. I did get compliments from the judges. I didn't even win Star Baker that week. But that bake for me was the, probably the epitome of my bake-off experience, because it was something that I never in a million years thought I could get right. But it was a bit of a triumph, to my eyes at least. It didn't collapse, it didn't leak, it managed to stay up, it looked beautiful. The decoration was based on one of my dad's wedding cakes, actually, that he made when I was a kid. And that stuck in my memory because it was so beautiful to look at. So I used that as an inspiration for the decoration. So again, it was not just a cake, it was bringing together a lot of memories, a lot of my background and my heritage. So I suppose that's probably what made it so special, like the focaccia that got me Paul's handshake.
Yeah, and so like how long before the show starts filming do you have to prepare all these different recipes for all the
You don't get much time. You don't get much time. Obviously, the technical challenges you know nothing about, because you only find out when you're in the tent and you lift the famous what is called the cloth, the gingham cloth. But basically you get given like about a week to develop your showstopper and your signature every time. So we were on a very tight schedule, weekly schedule of sending back recipes to the food producers, and effectively all they do, they cannot give you any advice, either whether it's right or wrong, or whether to improve it or not. All they check is whether it's within brief. So they just make sure that you will be producing something that matches the brief that they've given you. So in terms of size, if they ask you to make, I don't know, a sandwich ice cream, that's what you have to produce. If you come up with an ice cream that is not a sandwich ice cream, obviously you are asked to go back to the drawing board and come up with something different. But you're not given much time, which I suppose is part of the fun. I can say now in hindsight, while I was living through the process, I hated it with a passion because it was really stressful. Getting ready for the show, it was definitely the most stressful part, definitely the most tiresome part, also because I was still working full time back then. So I had to work out a way of practicing the bakes while looking after the family with a full-time, pretty high-profile job, and everything that life throws at you. So it wasn't easy to find the time to develop those recipes. The reality is that if the bakers in general were given more time, either to prepare the recipes or to actually make them on the show, I think that the bakers, the bakes that you see on the show would be way better than what you see today. Because obviously you would have more time to practice them, more time to make sure that they are exactly what you expect them to be, and you would have hopefully more time on the show to deliver what you have in mind. But I think that the producers do it on purpose to give you very little time to prepare them and to give you just enough time on the show to barely come up with something that is presentable, to the point that if anything, even the stupidest thing goes wrong, you're screwed because you don't have any more time to make it happen properly. But I think that they do it on purpose because obviously a struggling baker with a struggling bake doesn't produce the best result, but makes really good and entertaining TV. So when you see the bakers, tearing their head off because they don't have enough time to finish what they wanted to finish, that's exactly what makes it entertaining and interesting to watch. If everything was going perfectly according to plan, it would probably be a very boring show to watch. So I suppose they make the production makes the baker's life difficult, but they do it for the greater good. They do it because they want to produce TV that people enjoy watching.
Yeah, that's so true. And like one thing I was thinking about when you were saying that thing, that answering that question is like, do you like source the food and the ingredients yourself, and do you have a budget for that, or do you just send off a list of what you want and they get it?
For the tests, you source them yourself. For the show, you can request everything, and they will provide it for you. But if you've got some special ingredients that are very difficult for them to source, then you're more than entitled to bring it with you. So, for example, going back to my focaccia, for that focaccia, I used oil that is made by my father-in-law. He's got some olive orchards, so he makes his own olive oil. So I had that. I brought that with me on set because I wanted to use that, and I flew the olives with me from Italy on the plane, literally, because I wanted a specific type of olives that grow only in my hometown or near my hometown in Italy. So, I mean, I could have asked the crew to source those for me, but A, it would have been probably 10 times more expensive for them to buy them. And secondly, I wouldn't have been able to check the quality or what exactly they would get. So it was much safer for me to bring mine. There are some bakers, for example, that have been using foraged products that they have been foraging themselves, and obviously those products they have to use themselves. Others have been using things that they grow themselves. For example, people have been using honey from their own honeybees. They've been using rhubarbs that have been growing in their own back garden. So when it comes to those things, obviously there are some things that money cannot buy. And in that case, you're more than welcome to bring your own specific ingredients with you. But otherwise, the team is really, really good at sourcing even the most exotic ingredients. Let's put it that way.
I hope you're enjoying the interview so far. Please do subscribe because we do have some great interviews coming up in the next few months, as well as trying to get to 500 subscribers. But now it's time to get back to the interview. Yeah, so going back to how you felt like the family feeling, all living together, as well as the judges. So how did you cope when you did get criticism from these judges in the tent? How was that like?
I've always been very happy to have it. Actually, pretty much everywhere on television, everywhere in the world, you've got these big TV shows today. I can give you a couple of examples in the UK. You've got like stuff like The Hotel Inspector, or a lot of those TV shows that Sarah Beeny used to produce, where she would tell property developer what works and what doesn't. And I've always found it very frustrating when somebody, they call Alex Polizzi because their hotel isn't making a penny. Alex comes on the show and tells them what to do to fix it, and they don't accept the criticism, and they keep telling her, no, you're wrong and I'm right. And I'm like, you're talking to an hotelier that has got like 2 generations worth of experience on their back. They're telling you what you're doing wrong and you don't accept it. That always blows my mind. So when I was on the show, I always accepted the judges' criticisms very, with open arms. Because, let's be honest, how many opportunities a home baker like I am has to get somebody of the caliber of the judges to give you some feedback on something that you've prepared? It doesn't happen very often. So when somebody does, I personally took it quite happily. First of all, because it was always pretty reasonable. I've never been criticized for something that I didn't do wrong. There was, whenever I had criticism, it's because there was a lot of criticism to be had. And secondly, because I mean, if you accepting criticism is one of the many ways you've got to learn new things and to grow as professionally and personally. So I never took it personally. So probably that's why it never bothered me. They're not there to criticize you as a person. They're there to tell you whether your sponge works or doesn't. So I've always taken it very happily, contently, positively, and constructively.
Yeah. So then, obviously, you went on to getting into the final, where you said before you were surprised every single week that you got through. So was there pressure like going into the final, and also did you worry about going into the final with the last time you were Star Baker in week 5? Was that a worry for you?
Um, Look, the I never went on that show with the intention of winning it or with the aspiration of winning it. That has never crossed my mind. It was very hard for me to get ready for it, but once I stepped foot into the tent for the first time, from that point onwards, I've just enjoyed it. And I went into the final exactly with the same mindset. All I was telling myself, and I remember telling it to the other finalists as well, was, well, we made it to episode 10. We've got to go home, whatever happens anyway today. I mean, we can't possibly lose this. I mean, if whoever wins it, we are all winners already because we've already made it all the way to the finals. So we might as well enjoy it. And that's exactly what I was doing when I was in the tent. And yeah, I did look stressed because I had a couple of accidents, like the oven shutting itself on me, or things that happen when you are in the tent. It's the curse of the Bake Off tent, and it happens to everybody. But other than that, I just went in it with the purpose of getting just the best out of it and enjoying it, and that's what I did. It was really cathartic when I finally finished the showstopper of episode 10 of the final, just in time, literally on the gong, and I was like, this is done. I've done it. I made it. I made it to the end. I don't care what happens next. I'm a winner in my head. And I think that's I think it's a good attitude to have in life in general with many things. If you're happy with what you achieve, you end up thinking less of what you haven't achieved, I suppose. So I was very, very happy I would have been very, very happy to revel in the idea of being a finalist. Then the win came as well, so there was really nothing I could add to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you did hear your name being announced as the winner, take me through what was it going through your head in like the lead up to it, and then when you heard your name.
I don't know, Ethan. I genuinely don't know. It was. I remember that it was Noel announcing it. I remember vividly because it's etched in my memory. Literally, the perspective I had of the judges just standing in front of me. If I close my eyes now, I can see them. I can see Noel saying the winner of the 2021 Make Off is Giuseppe. The very first few seconds were really. Well, they are blurred in my memory. I remember vividly the other finalists screaming at me because they were jumping around, and I was what? Maybe I was asking myself, did he really say my name? Does that mean that I actually won Bake Off? It took a while. I had to compute because I had this almost how do I call it? It was like a repressed horror at the possibility that I might be celebrating just because I misunderstood what they said. So I had this image of myself celebrating because I thought they had said my name, but they hadn't. So I just wanted to reassure my brain that they actually did say my name. That was not a joke, and that I could actually allow myself to celebrate it and enjoy it. But it did take a few seconds for that to happen. And you could see the cogs in my head spinning after that happened on the show. You can actually see my face thinking, is that just what happened. But after that, once it did sink in, it was all enjoyable.
Yeah. So, like, how long was the time between knowing you have won and it being broadcast? Did you return to your job? And I suppose it's weird because, like, you probably know that there's lots of like fame as such coming and lots of opportunities coming, but you're in that limbo in between, like it being broadcast and filming.
So it was a few months because we filmed the final in July and it was aired at the end of November. I didn't tell anybody, I didn't even tell my kids. But for me,
Wow.
well, I must admit, Ethan, that I didn't realize how big a deal it was myself until it actually happened. And I started seeing my face on the Guardian and being interviewed by the Times and these sort of things. I never realized how big a deal that really was. But I have to say that back in those days, I was still living the illusion that my life would have been the same after Bake Off. So I was still going ahead with what I had planned for myself and my family. 6 days after filming the final, I was on a plane to Milan to start a new job there. And my plan was to move the family back to Italy. So I had so many things to do that summer, moving to a different country, getting set up in that different country. I went house hunting. I had to buy a new car, furnish the house, the flat I moved in. And I was there. I was not in the UK while the show was being broadcast. So I really didn't leave that experience myself because I just wasn't here. It was quite funny actually because I did fly back to the UK often during the weekends whenever I could in those days. And it felt very strange because I was roaming around Milan like a perfect nobody, like I had always done for the previous 45 years. The minute I landed in Stansted or Heathrow or wherever I was landing in London, it felt like I morphed from Clark Kent into Superman because everybody was stopping me. Are you Giuseppe from the go? Can we please take a selfie? So that was really awkward because I was living in almost this split reality where I was being my normal self in Italy, Milan. And then as soon as I landed in the UK, I felt like there were paparazzi at the front door just waiting for me to come out. And obviously for somebody that is a normal person like I am, that is not used to that level of attention, it was quite overwhelming at times, but always pleasurable, I have to say. I've always enjoyed it. It was never difficult for me to cope with that.
That must have been such a weird time for you, just going between the two. So, like, did you get to watch the show, and what was it like thinking that like over 9 million people see you bake every single week and are invested in your story?
I was terrified, Ethan. I was terrified. So I told you that I wasn't concerned particularly on the show, that I was there to enjoy it and I wanted to enjoy it. But the one concern I had was that I was going to make a fool of myself on national television. And that was, I have to admit, a concern that never left me all the way to watching the first episode on TV, because my overthinking personality got me to think, oh my god, if I make an idiot, if I look like an idiot on TV and everybody can see that, how are people gonna come back to me to ask me to carry out these very sophisticated research projects, which is what I was leading back in the days in the research center where I used to work, when I can't even bake a cake or a batch of biscuits. That was the worry I had in my head. But then immediately after I saw the very first episode, and I realized that really what you see is what you get. I mean, what happens in the tent is what is broadcast on the show, and there is no artificial editing, or at least I didn't experience any going on behind closed doors. The production team is very genuine. They do portray you for what you are. And also I realized that I didn't get any of the hate that I was concerned I might get online. I don't know, maybe I thought people might take the making for my accent or for my mustache or for my crazy hair. None of that happened. Actually, I got a lot of messages, almost encouraging me to embrace all of that. I never been able to grow my hair before Bake Off. I did just after that because of how empowered I felt and how the support I got from the community, baking community that I have online, all the followers that follow me on social media, gave me it was almost like a validation exercise that I went through, and I realized that there is nothing to be ashamed of if you've got a very thick Italian accent and you live in a foreign country and you look like an older version of Mario. It's absolutely fine, and I actually I'm glad that I went through this because I came out of the exercise a very different person compared to what I was before. I would have never expected me to have the confidence to go and bake live on This Morning or on a live TV show, as I ended up doing. And it was actually, now I'm at the other end of the spectrum where I got bitten by the bug because I enjoyed it greatly and I want to do more of that. And I just can't find the channel that would give me my own TV show. So hopefully at some point I'll manage to convince some producers to do something in this space.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like Bake Off changed your life personally and professionally a lot. So when did that decision come to not move to Italy, to stay in the UK and to do this professionally, to do baking professionally? And are you glad you're still in the UK, still living here, rather than Italy?
Okay, so to answer your first question, the decision came when I was offered the opportunity to write my first book. And the possibility of translating some of my dad's legacy into a book that would have been distributed globally was just too good an opportunity for me to miss. I would have regretted it for the rest of my life if I hadn't done it. Sadly, the job I had in Milan, it wasn't a job that I could do part-time. It wasn't a job that I could get a sabbatical in. So I had to quit. And it was a very easy choice, though, I have to say. I was sorry to let that job go in Italy because I liked it. And I was sorry to let my perspective life, Italian life with the family go. But then I realized that this was going to be for the greater good. And I'm glad I did it because after that, then I had the opportunity to write book number 2, which went very well. I'm now working on book number 3. I have done a lot of very fun activities after that when I decided to step into the baking world full time. Financially, perhaps it was the worst decision of my life. Because I had a very good salary and now I don't have as much money as I used to have, but I have much more fun now than before. Yeah, that's probably one of the aspects of coming out of a show like Bake Off that isn't particularly well discussed or thought through. It does come with a lot of opportunities. And if you want to follow those opportunities, however, those opportunities are not necessarily, they come easily, but they don't last long unless you put a lot of effort into building something out of it. And putting a lot of effort into building something out of it is absolutely doable, especially if it is your passion and you do it happily. But marrying that with the responsibility of having a family to look after, having a mortgage to pay and bills to pay is very difficult. So in a way, I am glad that I went on Bake Off when I was, a grounded middle-aged man, because that gave me like the perspective of taking everything with a pinch of salt and not being fooled into thinking that the aftermath would last forever. But in a way, I'm sorry that I didn't do it when I was in my 20s, because it would have been great to go through that and have those opportunities when you've got no ties in your life, when you don't have a family to feed, when you don't have a mortgage to pay, when you're still living with mom and dad, when if you stay 6 months without working, it's not the end of the world. Whereas, when you're, grown up, you can't afford that luxury, and you've got a real life to deal with. I think that I think I've played it quite well, though, because I've got now a situation that is fairly well balanced. I still get to do a lot of things that give me pleasure, and I can, have a lot of fun in. But I have managed to find like a bit of an equilibrium where the primary needs of the family are catered for, but still that leaves me enough time to bake cakes and come up with interesting recipes.
Yeah. So, what are some of the most unexpected opportunities you've got from it, and what are some of the best, some of the highlights?
So some of the most unexpected are some of the offers that I got from some of the fans of the show. There was this person that contacted me from the States after the final of Bake Off, and he offered me. He said that his wife was a big fan of the show. I think they were from San Diego or somewhere in the on the west coast of the States, and he offered me to join his family for about a week or two, all expenses paid, and go on a hiking trip with his wife and himself, and bake with his family, and just spend these 2 weeks in his mansion, just so that his wife could enjoy, I suppose, my presence and my bakes for a couple of weeks, which I, kindly declined as an offer. But yeah, that was really, really unexpected. I mean, I did realize that there is a lot of people out there with more money than sense, and I was certainly not expecting anybody to pay any money just to be in my company. So that was particularly strange to deal with. Yeah. And what else did you ask? The best outcome of it? Well, the best outcome.
The best, yeah.
I suppose. Well, I suppose it's discovering a side of myself that I didn't know I had. I told you at the beginning, I've always been socially awkward and enjoyed my solitude more than the social interaction. But I realized that I actually do enjoy being in front of a camera, and I think that seeing how a TV show is produced behind closed doors and seeing all the craftsmanship that goes into it, literally, I mean, from the skills of the cameraman to the creativity of the editors to the attention to detail of the people that look after the set, that all the things that go into it, I would have never expected that much of hard work to go into a 1 hour of TV, and I would pay good money to remain part of that world. I've had the opportunity to do a few other things after Bake Off, TV related, and I mean, I'm in awe every time, to the point that if I had done this in my 20s, I would have probably seriously considered and put a lot of more effort into trying to have a TV career. It's a very difficult world to break in because there is a lot of competition and it's a very volatile world. So it doesn't matter often. It doesn't matter how. That's probably what I've learned in the last few years. It doesn't matter how good you are. it matters more what the audience wants. And if the audience doesn't want another white middle-aged man with an Italian accent to cook more stuff on TV, then you're not going to have a career in that space. So it feels like suddenly a lot is out of your control, and there isn't no linear correlation between the effort that you put in and the reward that you get out of it, which is very different to the engineering world, for example, where the more you prepare yourself, the more skilled you are, the better you are rewarded in terms of positions that you achieve and salaries that you get. The TV world doesn't work that way, but it's still a freaking fascinating world to live in. So I think that the best part out of the whole experience for me has been just having the chance of peeking into that world. It's a bittersweet feeling though, because if nothing else comes out of it, then I will always, when you've tasted something really good, but you never have the opportunity to eat it again ever in your life, it's a bit bittersweet. So I should cherish the opportunity that I've had, but I'm hoping that won't be the last. I still hope that it won't be the last.
Yeah, so it sounds like, is that like the big goal, the dream goal for like a TV show, or like even just like would you consider like making your own show on YouTube or something like that?
I should probably do that. You see, you obviously belong to a different generation, and I should be talking to people of your age to get inspiration. I'm thinking of my own YouTube show, and yeah, that might happen. I think that for me, that's my golden goal right now, to have to be part of something that people enjoy watching as much as they have enjoyed watching Bake Off. But for once, I would like that to be my own baby, that comes out of my own brain, my own creativity, where I've got obviously much more space than whatever space I was given on Bake Off. That would certainly be like the dream. If that happened, it would be the dream come true. For the time being, however, I'm still enjoying the possibility that I never had before of, for example, being part of people's celebrations. I've been making many wedding cakes, and the fact that these people entrust you with a dessert for probably one of the most important days of their life is quite flattering and quite enjoyable. I enjoy the creative freedom that often these people give you to just come up with whatever you think is good or decent or flavorsome. But yeah, perhaps I suppose that means that my dream number 2 would be to have my own bakery at some point, maybe. Who knows? A micro bakery perhaps. Somewhere here in Cheltenham.
Oh wow!
Fingers crossed.
So what does your average week in your life look like now? What type of things is it made up of?
Oh God, where do I start? The reality is that I'm spinning way too many plates, Ethan. That's the reality of things. So I've got my part-time engineering job still taking place, which I enjoy greatly, thankfully. So that takes, I don't know, like a third or almost up to half to my week. Then the rest of the time I spend between looking after and organizing my baking classes. I hold baking classes almost every other month here in Cheltenham. And they do require a gargantuan amount of preparation work that goes into it. I've been having fun designing and producing my own baking tools. Being an engineer, I'm very picky when it comes to having the right tools for the right job. So I haven't launched any of them, but I've got, they are happening. Excuse me. Happening as we speak, and at some point on my website, I'll be launching these sort of Giuseppe's designed baking tools. I've been working on my third book so far that I hope to be able to complete at some point by next year, which will be all about breads and savory bakes, which are my favorites. And as I told you earlier on, I've been doing a lot of catering. So for birthdays, celebrations, so I've been lucky enough to make very fancy looking cakes for happy couples or for people turning 40 or 60. So for very special celebrations. I've been doing that, all of that from my own domestic kitchen. So I've been also working in the meantime to create my own space where I can finally, have access to all of my gadgets, to all of my cake pans, to all of my decorating tools readily, rather than having to scavenge for them because they're hidden in some box somewhere in the conservatory.
Okay, so these are my last few quick fire questions. So what has been the highest point in your career outside of Bake Off? Obviously, winning Bake Off was a pretty good one.
Well, I felt very proud when I completed my PhD, but I think that probably the highest point in my engineering career was when I contributed to the manufacturing of brace yourself, of a carbon fiber and epoxy resin landing gear strut for the Boeing 787.
Wow.
Yeah, I know it's a mouthful, but this is back in the days when I was still at the university. I was part of the project that made this large. It's a strut, so it's like imagine like a big chunk, like a big trunk of material with two lugs at the end that holds in place the nose landing gear of the Boeing 787. And it's traditionally made out of titanium, machined out of a massive titanium billet, so it's really expensive and really heavy. I was part of a project that made it entirely out of carbon fiber composite, which is the material that makes the Formula One cars. So it's extremely strong, but much, much lighter. Making it out of those materials isn't an easy job. But yeah, I was part of the team that made the very first prototype that ended up being 25% lighter than the metallic equivalent. So I was really proud when I made something that was actually flying.
Yeah. So on the other side, what was like the lowest point in your career post Bake Off?
Or post Bake Off, I've got plenty of failures in my engineering career prior to Bake Off, because obviously when working in a research environment, you have to test a lot of things, and most of them don't work, and you end up with massive failures.
Yeah.
I could fill a list as long as my arm. So let's not go there. Lowest point after Bake Off. I don't know. Did I? You caught me off guard there, Ethan. I can't think of. I can't think of anything particularly unsuccessful that I've done. Well, probably. I don't know if it is the lowest, but it is still one of those things that haunts me. When I was on. Which show was it? I think it was This Morning, because it was with Dermot O'Leary and Alison. I was invited to the show because of my the publication of my second book, and I was invited to bake one of my cakes, the cakes in the book, on the show. So I prepared everything, and I was very careful of making sure that I wasn't forgetting anything, that everything was ready, and it was doing, ready for the cameras. But I was making a clementine upside down cake, and I realized only halfway through the bake that I had forgotten the clementine juice to add the
Oh
clementine juice.
no.
But, exactly that face. That's exactly how I reacted. Thankfully, somebody must have told Dermot because at some point he came up and said, "Oh, Giuseppe, aren't you forgetting to add that juice that you got over there?" Okay, but I was like, you might be onto something, Dermot. You're probably better baker than I am. Obviously you're on live TV and you're not used to it, so the nerves get the better of you, and I almost forgot the key ingredient into that cake. I suppose that's probably the lowest point I've ever reached after Bake Off.
So, if you could only eat one Italian dessert for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Dessert?
Yes.
Okay, so it would have to be a sfogliatella, which is a traditional Neapolitan pastry, this big. It's triangular, and it's made of, imagine a very, very crunchy, flaky, crispy puff pastry, but much, much crunchier than that. So the same sort of structure, but much, much crunchier than that. Filled with, oh my God, I'm salivating just by thinking of that. It's filled with a filling made of semolina, ricotta, a lot of orange flavor, orange candied peels, and a hint of orange blossom water. So it's a traditional pastry from Naples that you can find in every single bakery in Naples, wherever you go, Naples and in the surrounding areas. It's ridiculously difficult to make, to the point that very, very few bakeries actually make their own. You would never make it at home because it's such a complicated exercise. You have to make a filo pastry, roll it up, cut it in discs, then open them up, and then it's just mind-bogglingly complicated. But it is just it's such a pleasure to bite into that crispy shell and then into the soft filling. If you ever go anywhere around Naples in Italy, make sure you don't miss one. If I had to eat one dessert for the rest of my life, it would definitely be a sfogliatella.
Okay, so what's your go-to comfort bake?
Oh, bread, pizza, bread, focaccia, anything that is bready and savory. It's my definitely comfort food to have, 100%.
What's one of your non-baking hobbies?
I am a bit. I told you earlier that I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to design. So I like to browse and um, buy, if I can, designers stuff, but not designer stuff in the sense of like the Gucci or Valentino's dresses or anything like that. When I say designer stuff, I mean, for example, uh, I don't know, a knife sharpener that is particularly well designed to the point that it sits in the New York Museum of Modern Art. I've got one of those.
Okay.
Or like, I don't know if you know it, the Philip Stark juicer that looks like almost like an alien spaceship that sits on your kitchen counter. That sort of thing. I mean, that I'm fascinated by anything that is very carefully conceived and designed.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite and least favorite thing about baking professionally?
Oh, washing up, 100%. I mean, the best part of being on Bake Off is that somebody would do the washing up for you. I'm fortunate enough that whenever I'm making wedding cakes, my wife sits next to me and she does all the washing up, because if I had to do it, I don't think I could probably stomach baking anymore in my life. I hate it very much.
That's very fair. What's your one top tip to aspiring home bakers who want to take their skills to the next level?
Make sure that you source trusted recipes, which sounds obvious, but especially in the social media age as we are today, where you can just, find anything on TikTok and Instagram, you have no idea. When you develop the sort of baking critical eye, you scan a recipe and you know whether it will work or it won't. And the amount of times that I've seen recipes on Instagram, on TikTok, shared with people, and you read them and you're like, there's way too little flour in here. This is never going to hold up when you bake it. This is never going to work. It's unbelievable. So I would say, don't, as a novice baker or somebody that wants to elevate their bakes, getting a recipe that is not going to work. They try to make it and it fails. They think, oh, it's my fault. I've done something wrong. This is not for me. And it's a shame because it might put them off baking for good. So my number one suggestion is only use recipes from reputable sources. Like me. My recipes always work. So buy my books and you'll be fine. Joking, but but that's what I mean.
So one of the final things I'm doing here, so I posted you on Instagram, you reposted it as well. So I got a few questions from people from Instagram. So quick fire, what is your favorite supermarket bakery section?
Supermarket bakery. Do you mean what's my favorite supermarket or my favorite? I don't understand the question.
Like do you know, like Lidl Bakery or like
the bakery
Sainsbury's
section.
Bakery
Section.
or
Yeah. So I'm a fan of a couple of things that Max Spencer sells, like the apple turnover. I find it just addictive, and also the stone baked baguettes from Max Spencer. I love to bits. So yeah, I would have to say Max Spencer. Although Waitrose defends itself very nicely. They've got some decent quality bread over there as well.
Yeah. What is the perfect dessert to showcase your family on Christmas? Someone asked.
For Christmas, in my own family, we don't make big cakes. We make biscuits, Christmas biscuits. Especially in my hometown, there is a tradition of making some specific types and specific flavors of biscuits that are, in a way, all variation of the gingerbread. So they are very spicy, very flavorsome biscuits. So I would definitely do some of those. My favorites are called Rococo, which are a fatless biscuit made with lots of almonds or hazelnuts, or a combination of both, lots of orange peel and candied orange peel, some cocoa, and then a concoction of spices like black pepper, cinnamon, ground cloves. I can't remember them all. Ground coriander seeds. The smell of those things when you bake them is just so Christmassy. That's what Christmas smells like in my head.
Yeah, and what dessert reminds you of home?
I would say it's an Easter tart that again is from the Naples region. It's called pastiera, which is a very, very peculiar tart filled with wheat grain, cooked wheat grain, and ricotta and sugar, and lots of other spices. But again, the flavor is phenomenal. I suppose I'm particularly attached to those bakes that are very flavorsome because they remind you in your head, they are linked up to good positive memories in your childhood. So yeah, that is definitely one of those bakes. The smell of reminds me very much of my good old days in my hometown. Yes, as a kid.
Yeah, someone asked what made you switch from engineering to baking, which we've already covered. Someone else asked, any chance of you coming to New York, the New York City area for an event?
I have actually. I was in New York, well, this is about a year and a half ago now, for a baking class. I will be back this summer to the States, but I'm going to the Philadelphia sort of area for different reasons. But I'm trying to organize some events over there while I'm there so that I can meet some of my American friends. Yeah, I'd love that.
Is that something that surprised you, like the global scale of Bake Off, how they love it in America as well?
Big time, yes. I think I've got more followers in the States than in the UK. And one thing
Oh,
that
wow.
surprised me a lot when I was last in the States, as I mentioned, about a year and a half ago, I was in New York. During the winter, it was December, so I was all scarfed up and covered up. And somebody recognized me bang in the middle of Manhattan, which
Oh,
shocked me.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. They looked up and said,
Wow.
"Oh, we are big fans. You're Giuseppe, big fans." I was like, "How is this even possible?" So yeah, the show over there is really um, it's got a very big following. In fact, I have to say that I haven't run a single baking class of mine without somebody from North America coming over just for the class. There's always
Wow.
been somebody either from the States or from Canada joining one of my classes in Cheltenham. Yes, yeah, it's really
Wow,
humbling.
that's amazing.
Yeah, to realize that people are happy to fly for 8 hours just to spend a day with you. It's incredible, and they're always
Yeah.
incredibly lovely people. I have to say, they are so nice to spend time with. It's more of a pleasure for me to spend time with them than the other way around usually. But yeah.
So one last question from Instagram, and then I've got two last questions about advice. Have you ever considered writing a non-baking book, a more like cookbook?
I haven't thought of that. I've been thinking of children's books, um, so that might happen maybe in the future. Um, the reality is that, as you might have guessed, I'm very opinionated on many things. So if a non-baking book uh, would have to happen, I would have to understand exactly which topic I want to be opinionated about. I don't know. It would be a struggle for me to pinpoint where I could actually make a positive contribution with my comments, with my opinion, with what I think uh, of. So yeah, I think that would be the hardest part, deciding what to be blubbering about, because the blubbering, as you might have noticed, comes quite easily.
So what advice would you give someone who wants to become a professional baker? And I suppose if there's anyone watching this that wants to enter Bake Off, what advice would you give to them?
Oh, do it, because there is nothing you've got to lose. Even if you don't make it to the final 12, I can tell you that just going through the selection process is quite. It's an anecdote that you can, tell your grandchildren. So it's definitely something that I would do. And somebody that wants to get into baking. Well, I don't think I'm qualified to give any advice in that I am not a professional baker just yet. Ask me again when I will have finally opened my own bakery here in Cheltenham. Ask me again and I'll tell you how to make it happen. I don't know just yet because I haven't found out myself.
And what advice would you give to someone who is just wanting to chase their dream generally?
Oh my goodness! Well, you're not going to close on a positive note if you ask me this question right now, because because everybody says, yeah, absolutely, you've got to chase that dream, go for it, don't give up. Yeah, if you are again in your 20s and you've got nothing else to think of. Otherwise, I would say get yourself a nice, stable job that pays the bill, and then find the time to chase that dream. I know it's really, what's the word? This is a known. Oh gosh, I can't think of what's the word I'm thinking of. this is really underwhelming to hear. But I think this is the most practical piece of advice I could wholeheartedly give people. It's certainly the advice that I will give my kids.
Yeah, and so thank you for being on today. And actually, it's 5 years today that I first uploaded the first episode of the podcast back in 2020. Yeah, today.
Well, congratulations! Wow, that calls for celebrations.
You're officially. Thank you. So thank you. It's been a great interview. It's been really, really interesting getting to hear everything about the Bake Off.
Thank you for having me, and it was a good chat. Hopefully your listeners will enjoy too.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Giuseppe. The links to his socials and website are in the description down below. And as you heard in the interview, this episode was filmed on the exact 5-year anniversary of the podcast. This episode was filmed on the 23rd of May 2025, and the first episode got uploaded to YouTube on the 23rd of May 2020. Can you believe it? Half a decade I've been working on this podcast. Thank you if you've been here since day one, or if you've just joined, thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. I've been really enjoying it, and here's to another 5 years of some incredible guests we've got coming up in the next few months for you. So we'll be back with another interview next month, but for now, goodbye.